And do you think we're okay? IT? Tech, are we okay?
2 seconds.
Okay.
We're plugging in our second.
Okay. Very delicately, because we can use this mic too if it actually won't disrupt the equilibrium of the plasmas.
The mic should be fine, it's whether or not the clicker actually works.
Okay. Oh.
Well, yeah, because you can.
If you need one of us to stay up and wait for you,
Could you? That would be fantastic.
yeah, I'll grab the school and I'll sit over here just tell me what to play.
All right, so good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. This is actually the 10th-year anniversary of the John Trudell Lecture in Native American Studies. And, it's a great honor. And I also want to, before I invite our good friend and educator and Omaha Tribal Elder, Dr. Rudy Mitchell, to give an opening prayer, I want to thank Kyle Finley, who's been a good friend with Native American Studies for many years. He has graciously, for many years now, live streamed both our Trudell lectures and our honoring. And so thank you, Kyle. We always appreciate that. And without further ado, it's my honor to invite Dr. Rudy Mitchell to the podium.
Aho wagada uda de ati wish de uda ati ho Omaha jaja vivita sihitwa waga jaja vivita Dr. Rudy Mitchell in Kasabe ete mableho Omaha ete mableho. Here is customary as an elder in many tribes for elders to speak their own language to introduce themselves, and that's what I did today. On behalf of the Omaha tribe, which I'm a member, I want to welcome Dr. Adams to our ancestral grounds here. The Omaha tribe have been in this area for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it's always our customary to recognize any other tribes that come to our land, and we welcome them and others. We used to have a ceremony that involved putting out food and exchange of gifts to other tribal members that come in our area. So, Dr. Adams, I want to welcome you on behalf of the Omaha tribe to our land here. I would offer a word of prayer, and I'd like for you all to pray along with me. We all know today in the world there's a lot of chaotic situations going on, so please pray along with me. Dadiho wakanda, Dadiho Jesus, wanga da mati Dadiho, wanga da maya de Dadiho. Sham ukita wa'u ati Dadiho, Dr. Adams Laelek de Dadiho. Father, as we gather this evening to hear a speaker from another tribe here, we ask that you would bless each and every one of us that are here today to be with our families, extended families, and our friends, wherever they may be. We ask you to help us with a lot of the world situations that are going on, that somehow peace may prevail, Father. And also, Father, one of the greatest gifts you can give to us, not only Native American people, but to other people as well as, Father, is good health. Many of us suffer from pain, different diseases, illnesses. We ask that somehow, Father, you could heal us, Father. And at times, Father, we are faced with many challenges in the world, Father. Help us to overcome those challenges so that we may continue on that good path of life, Father. Again, Father, bless each and every one of us here as we depart in the four winds, that you watch over us and take care of us. We ask this in your Son's name. Amen.
I would like to invite Douglas Esau to play a welcoming song. Thank you, Douglas. So thank you for joining us, either in person or through live stream here. It's an honor to be with you this evening for this lecture. As I said, the 10-year anniversary. And the Native American Studies program, we were established way back in 1992. And we're very fortunate to have such a wonderful student body and Native community. Our program covers a kind of a gambit of disciplines: history, religious studies, political science, English, anthropology, gerontology, global indigenous studies, archaeology, medical humanities, art, and public administration. Tonight's gathering would not be possible, and has been the case for many years, if not for the generous assistance of the Goldstein Center for Human Rights and the Goldstein Family Community Chair in Human Rights. We also want to acknowledge and thank the support from the History Department, the Religious Studies Department, Political Science, Sociology, Anthropology Department as well. And Native Studies, we were able to obviously assist too. I just want to thank our soon-to-be Dr. Carol Redwing, a citizen of the Yankton Sioux Tribe, for her idea to bring Dr. Adams in. Melinda and Carol were students at Haskell Indian Nations University several years ago. I don't know exactly how long. And of course, my name is Brady DeSanti. I'm a citizen of the Lakota-Ray Ojibwe tribe out of Hayward, Wisconsin. I also have Bad River Ojibwe ancestry. I've been at UNO for many years in this capacity since 2007. I'm also the director of the Native American Studies program. And now I would like to let Tim Trudell say a few words on behalf of the Trudell family and so forth before we introduce our speakers.
Help, Pitikiafi, Hateye tu waste, Tate topa, Hoye, Kia pi wichasta, Imakiapi, Tim Ichiapi. Hello, all my relatives and friends. Good evening. My Dakota name is sending his voice from Four Directions Man. My Euro-American name is Tim. I think that'll help me a little bit. I'd like to thank our ancestors for allowing us to gather this evening to recognize, honor, and share the words and beliefs of our brother. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for the prayer. Thank you, Mr. Esau, for the opening song. And thank you, Dr. Adams, for speaking tonight. On behalf of my brothers, sisters, our children, John's children and their families, and all our relatives, Wapita, thank you. to the University of Nebraska, Omaha, for continuing to honor our brother John, who dedicated decades working for equality and fair treatment of all human beings. The Trudell Lecture Series occupies a large space in the hearts of not just our family, but the Indigenous community. So again, thank you, Brady, for ensuring our brother's legacy and story continues. John didn't take his responsibilities lightly, nor should we. As I look around the room, I see people of all walks of life, all backgrounds. I see white people, black people, brown people, men, women, Christians, non-Christians, people from every walk of life. And honestly, that's the wonderful thing about America, is that we are truly a melting pot of diversity. And the Trudell Lecture Series brings people together. My personal belief is that, I believe strongly in diversity, equity, inclusiveness, and accessibility. And unfortunately, we have people who don't believe in that. And I believe that they need to take a look at themselves in the mirror and examine why they don't believe everyone deserves a seat at the table. Our brother believed in that. He believed everyone's equal. Everyone should be included. We are a diverse group of people. He believed that we are the people of all tribes. We're the humans, and tonight we honor that history and John's legacy. And my hope is that while we celebrate the 10th anniversary this year, which is wonderful, that we gather in 10 more years and we're honoring our brother for the 20th time. So again, thank you for your time this evening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's presentation. And Washte Dake, Yapte, Yapi. Love to you all. Wapita. Thank you.
I'm not the attraction here. I'm going to go through. I want to introduce, but it's a great honor for me to introduce Dr. Melinda Adams, who I admire her work greatly. She's making great contributions, not just in Indian country, but in the academic world and so forth. It's really exciting to have her with us. So Dr. Melinda Adams belongs to the Inde San Carlos Apache tribe. She's an assistant professor in the Department of Geography and Atmospheric Sciences and Indigenous Studies at the University of Kansas. She is a trained environmental scientist, and her research focuses on the revitalization of indigenous land stewardship practices towards climate mitigation in partnership with tribal nations in California, the Great Plains, and First Nations abroad. Dr. Adams' work has been supported by the National Science Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and the Mellon Foundation. She's appeared in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, Global Change Biology, and the Journal of Wildland Management. Dr. Adams holds her Bachelor of Science from Haskell Indian Nations University, Masters of Science from Purdue University, and PhD from the University of California, Davis. As a tribal college graduate and alumni from UC Davis, which is near the Bay Area, California, Melinda has found several opportunities to learn the deep history of leadership and advocacy work by John Trudell, and is grateful to offer remarks that connect to her own work toward amplifying Indigenous science, sovereignty, and stewardship with, by, and for Indigenous people. So without further ado, it's a great honor to introduce Dr. Melinda Adams.
Okay, welcome. Hello, everyone. I was excited if we were going to have a handful of people show up. So I'm even more humbled to see a full room tonight. So thank you, Oshon. Thank you so much for coming out this evening and listening to some of what I have to say. I recognize that we are a little bit moving it along a little bit slower, so I will try to streamline some things, probably in the 8th slide or so. So patience as I show you my professoring skills and move things along in times of challenge. But Dablate, Melinda Adams, Honchle, hello, my name is Melinda. I belong to the Inde San Carlos Apache tribe, and I'm visiting today from Lawrence, Kansas, where I'm an assistant professor. But before I begin, I too wanted to extend thanks to the Indigenous Studies Department, Brady, the History Department, and the Goldstein Center for Human Rights, and of course, the Trudell family, for the invitation to share my work I'd also like to recognize the Omaha, Ponca, Pawnee, Otah-Missouri, Santee Dakota, Lakota, Arapaho, Cheyenne, Kaw, and Ho-Chunk Winnebago peoples. As Brady mentioned, my background and my story, I'm a professor at KU studying at the intersection of Indigenous science and Western science. I graduated in 2023 with a PhD from UC Davis, and I'm proud to say that my journey started as a tribal college student, where I graduated from Haskell Indian Nations University. Today I'll be sharing insight as an Indigenous scholar, an Indigenous woman, a professor who balances the fields of Western science and traditional ecological knowledge. As a researcher, my work primarily focuses on the ecological effects of Indigenous land stewardship practices, fire, that are being called on more and more by universities, researchers, government agencies, and our own peoples as we collectively reach for sustainable solutions to mitigate the effects of climate change, and specific to my work, mitigate the effects of catastrophic wildfire. However, in doing this work, especially in TEK, which is often over-romanticized and generally left in the periphery of climate solutions, I use fire stewardship as a lens to reveal underlying but connected issues in activating traditional ecological knowledge, including policy, data protection, and most substantially, human rights. These are grounded through my interpretation of, as the title suggests, science, stewardship, and sovereignty. Now, when I say I research fire, you might not think of policy, data protection, and human rights, but tonight I'm here to story walk us through the on-the-ground work that I do with Native communities that incorporates all three, framed as Indigenous fire stewardship toward climate and wildfire mitigation. And of course, being inspired by scholar activist John Trudell, I will share how he has inspired my work, beginning from my time at Haskell, following me to my studies in Northern California, and culminating in the work that I do today with our peoples internationally. This discussion feels particularly timely, as elsewhere in this state, not only are you all experiencing the second warmest and fourth driest winter, but you're also experiencing the largest wildfire in Nebraska history, the Morel Fire, which burned roughly 642,000 acres, an area nearly the size of Rhode Island, and set off a chain of subsequent wildfires, including the Cottonwood Fire, 129,000 acres consumed, and the Ashby and Minor fires consuming 14,000 acres. That's a grand total of 800,000 acres. So to center how I'm interpreting Indigenous cultural fire, there's many definitions, as our peoples have different cultures, customs, lifeways, languages, so each tribe embraces cultural fire differently. So to lean on a common approach to cultural fire, it's intentional fire led by Indigenous peoples, placed for resource rejuvenation or to meet cultural objectives. It also improves ecosystem health or ecosystems and builds wildfire resilience. So this feels timely to ask, when what I'll keep coming back to is, what would our lands look like today if Indigenous land stewardship, including fire practices, were never removed? This is not a lecture on returning to or going back, but instead is a call to reactivate Indigenous landkeeping practices that are respectful, reciprocal, and relational, and to remember that Indigenous lifeways, cultures, and ways of being have always been adaptable to a changing environment, and we are an embodiment of that principle. So I'll have some of John's words threaded throughout the presentation, and thank you to Tim Trudell and family for offering their favorite quotes spoken by their brother and their relative. So to start, I first learned John Trudell, as I've said now, at Haskell in a contemporary issues course, and was drawn to activism work that he has done, and how one goes about championing Indigenous peoples' rights. At the same time, while taking environmental science courses, I learned about the role of caretaking our peoples have always incorporated from many different tribes, representing at any given time 130 different tribal nations at Haskell. To me, this was impactful, finding the similarities and distinction between tribes, learning science while navigating sovereignty, not merely as a legal or political status defined by the state, but as an inherent lived experience that predates contact. Learning this as a young person was powerful. Enjoying the field of environmental science, land connection, and TEK, I continued my educational journey to Purdue University, studying the effects of fire on tall grass prairie ecosystems, cherished and tended to by tribes in the Midwest and the Great Plains. However, in my studies, I found it challenging to find references that acknowledged Indigenous peoples' use of purposeful fire, which many of us, including in this region, have been doing since time immemorial. Many of the papers defaulted the presence of fire to naturally ignite it, which is factual, but left out land tending practices that our peoples demonstrated using low temperature and low intensity fire. At the time, anthropological record didn't acknowledge these records as profoundly as the field does today. So as a young scholar, I noticed the use of TEK in scholarship and how it is included or not, and many times left out of contemporary environmental issues. Understanding how the scientific world defines and activates TEK, I envisioned how TEK needs to be redefined and used in academia and work that is done with, by, and for our peoples. So from here, I journeyed out west to further study solutions for climate and environmental issues at UC Davis, adjacent to the Bay Area. Here, I found connection to many tribes also there to study and found myself spending a lot of time in community at the Native Center near Indigenous Studies. I learned more about John Trudell through the occupation of Alcatraz movement and even made the Thanksgiving sunrise journey my first year in the PhD program. I learned about the violations of the Treaty of Fort Laramie, about the 19-month occupation of Alcatraz, and the grassroots efforts that sparked international Indigenous peoples' movement for justice, rights, and truth. In parallel, as a scientist, here I was, an Apache from Kansas, wanting to work with fire plants and soils, and I quickly learned of this growing movement of cultural fire. I later learned that the reclamation of this ancestral land stewardship practice was being advocated throughout the state, and later on, I gathered that many tribes had been pushing for the return of fire stewardship throughout the United States, and as we're seeing today, across the world. Spending time with elders and practitioners, and sparked by the human rights issues offered by Trudell, the tribes I worked with in California made sure that I knew it wasn't simply that they wanted fire stewardship returned. There were historic and ongoing issues of land access, tribes' lack of federal recognition, and a history wrought with intentional removal and erasure of Indigenous peoples' history. Recognizing there were issues far beyond fire, I spent time learning about unratified treaties, landless tribes, and history of public and federal lands that were founded and operate under fire suppression, an operational structure common in many agencies throughout the United States and worldwide. My time out west resulted in connections and partnerships with peoples using science to advocate for our sovereignty, our inherent rights to steward lands with TEK that is defined by and for our peoples. Through an earned PhD, adding to the less than 1% of Native faculty in those positions that we have throughout the Academy, supporting the work I do today, building coalitions with tribal communities in the West, the Midwest, and abroad to connect our land stewardship and our fire practices, while at the same time using it as a lens to address policy and inherent rights of Indigenous peoples. So now that I've story walked you through some things, now that I've shared some background, I'd like to share some of the scholarship I've written and the work that I do with tribes under the 3 pillars that I've contextualized and invited you all out to hear more. There's science, sovereignty, and stewardship. Most locally, I'd like to share some of my work I do with the Iowa tribe of Kansas and Nebraska. Like tribes out west, for thousands of years, Indigenous nations in this region historically stewarded highly diverse tallgrass prairie through low-intensity seasonal burns to renew grasses and support food and medicine plants. However, through removal, homestead acts, and large-scale conversion to industrial agriculture, the tallgrass prairie was reduced from tens of millions of acres that made up the Midwestern part of the United States to the less than 4% that remains today. So the Iowa tribe, like many tribes in the Great Plains, wants to see that tallgrass prairie returned. It carries medicine plants, culturally significant plants, plants that hold our language, songs, and stories. In 2018 and 2020, the Nature Conservancy played a key role in returning 444 acres of land back to the Iowa tribe of Kansas, helping the tribe reclaim ancestral territory on the Nebraska-Kansas border for cultural preservation and ecological restoration. Recognizing their role as prairie fire stewards and creating a multi-year cultural burn plan with the tribe centering Mahapehi, or in their language, land fire, as efforts to scale up their use of fire and plant reseeding in their tribal national park, set to be the largest fully operated, tribally ran national park in the United States. To further share how this land stewardship work reverberates across science, stewardship, and sovereignty, I'll share now vignettes of my ongoing collaborative projects I'm grateful to have done with tribal nations across the Plains, Midwest, and with First Nations groups in Canada. So the first is this forthcoming book. It's called Landkeeping. It's an anthology and is the first of its kind to offer a collection of research that bridges the gap between traditional ecological knowledge and fire science and modern environmental science. It argues that the quote-unquote fire problem, unquote, in North America isn't just about climate change. It's about a severed relationship between Indigenous peoples and our lands. Our contributors, a mix of Indigenous elders, fire practitioners, and researchers, explore cultural burning, the practice of using low-intensity, purposeful fire to maintain ecosystem health, kinship with landscapes, moving away from quote-unquote managing land as a resource to keeping it as a relative. And resilience, how Indigenous methods provide a more sustainable path forward than total suppression policies that have failed us in recent decades. And it's a really attractive looking cover. Next is the status of tribes and climate change. It's typically a document referenced in the National Climate Assessment. We go to climate assessment for researchers, climate scientists, government agencies, and tribes. Our Good Fire chapter was developed after high volume requests from communities, researchers, and under the auspices of the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals, or ITEP, that's through Northern Arizona University. I recommend this report in its entirety, not just our chapter, but because it touches on pertinent issues within our community, including water sovereignty, conservation in protected areas, and cultural preservation. Our writing circle discusses how fire was criminalized and suppressed, and how that suppression contributes to the wildfire crises that we face today. But more importantly, the work highlights a resurgence of Indigenous fire stewardship across the country, including in Northern California, to the fiery, wildfire-prone Southern California, Ojibwe lands of the Great Lakes, and impacts our people on the East Coast. These efforts are not only restoring ecosystems, so this effort in reclaiming fire stewardship, gaining access to lands that need land tending, they're restoring sovereignty, identity, and our Indigenous community well-being. Healing the land with fire is healing our cultural lifeways and our people. So because there's a connection to human rights, and in the spirit of John Trudell, I'll now talk about some of the Indigenous peoples' rights to discourse, some policy work that I've done, and this newer budding realm of research within academia, Indigenous data sovereignty. And I like to think of Indigenous data sovereignty as process, protocol, and permissions. When we're working with Indigenous peoples, when we're taking data, how are we handling that responsibly? It's been addressed before for decades from community members, and now in academia we have these attractive new words that allow us as Native scholars and allied scholars to embed them into more university policies and peer-reviewed publications. So I have this framework on Indigenous data sovereignty, but first I wanted to start with what's informed this data sovereignty. It's the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, or UNDRIP, which is 38 articles that are written, not yet codified in certain countries, but they are ways in which Indigenous peoples have inherent rights to knowledge systems, to educational systems, to land access, to tending those lands. So UNDRIP informs this data sovereignty framework that I have. So this paper that was informed by cultural practitioners and elders calls us to activate some of the 38 articles. And according to Anishinaabe legal scholar Cheryl Lightfoot, the UNDRIP recognizes both Indigenous peoples' right to self-determination and simultaneously offers protections in regard to the right to sovereignty and territory vis-a-vis Indigenous peoples' claims. UNDRIP is an instrument that should motivate and guide steps towards reconciliation with First Nations and Indigenous peoples on just terms. So to streamline a bit here, I'll show you or tell you the articles that are written into this specific framework for fire. But for academia, if we're doing work with Indigenous peoples and data sovereignty, think of substituting the word fire with whatever you're researching. These are some guidelines put forward. So calling for article number 31, I'll have a summary of the UNDRIP articles on the next slide. But 31 quotes that Indigenous peoples have the right to maintain, control, and protect and develop their cultural heritage, traditional knowledge, and traditional cultural expressions, as well as the manifestations of their sciences, technologies, and cultures. So land tending and stewardship, fire stewardship, fulfills Article 31 of UNDRIP. It also fulfills Article 32. Indigenous peoples have the right to determine and develop priorities and strategies for the development or use of their lands and territories and other resources, including restoration. It also states that entities shall consult and cooperate in good faith with Indigenous peoples concerned through their own representative institutions to obtain their free, prior, and informed consent for the approval of any project affecting their lands and territories under those resources, particularly in connection with development, utilization, or exploitation of mineral, water, or other resources. Again, this is international declarations, not just in the United States, but also beyond. So finally, this fire article recognizes the return of fire practices and land stewardship, fulfills Article 18. Indigenous peoples have the right to participate in decision-making in matters that would affect our rights through representatives chosen by themselves in accordance with our own procedures, as well as to maintain and develop our own decision-making institutions. Land and fire management, this is me speaking now, land and fire management and data gathering is an exercise of sovereignty, both as a state apparatus, how it's legally upheld with federal relationships with tribes, as well as our communal democracy, as our governmental systems, democratic systems, far predates state-sanctioned interpretations of sovereignty. They exist and reflect our 7 generations thinking. The decisions that we make now are done so for the betterment of 7 generations ahead. Indeed, the right to participate in governance and decision-making encompasses both management and data gathering principles for the collective benefit of our peoples. In some of these 2 slides, Indigenous and allied scholars have identified UNDRIP as an apparatus to recognize Indigenous peoples' rights to self-determine and govern through land stewardship and fire knowledge is data. It's deserving of processes, protocols, and protection of data by communities and for communities. To expand a little bit further, and I'll streamline this, to further expand UNDRIP, we also have this piece on Indigenous peoples' rights discourse, which is defined by the United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner. It focuses on reorganizing the collective and individual human rights of Indigenous populations, prioritizing self-determination, land sovereignty, and cultural preservation. At its core, IPRD is supported by 2 foundational documents, ILO 169 and UNDRIP Convention 169, also known as the Indigenous People and Tribals Convention. It is a legally binding treaty that sets out framework for the protection of the rights and interests of Indigenous and tribal peoples. To date, only 23 nations have ratified the convention, with a substantial presence in Latin America. So what we do here is we present 3 case studies of invoking ILO 169 as a success, and we also talk about how it's been a failure. So the success story is one that I focus on through Indigenous Fire Stewardship. So we point towards how Indigenous peoples are actively implementing climate solutions through our landkeeping practices and supports biodiversity, improves ecosystem health, and overall community well-being. Finally, I'd like to share with you all a newly published piece written together in a writing circle of 13 Indigenous fire stewards, elders, and cultural practitioners, where we aim to restore Indigenous governance, culture, and authority over land itself. The paper connects the major themes of wildfire mitigation, ecosystem resilience, and climate adaptation across wildfire-prone Southern California, British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, and the northeastern United States. Although I will say, now that we're here in the Midwest, rather than being in a wildfire-prone path, we're starting to see the secondary effects of wildfire. Certainly, if you were outside at any time this summer, you saw the orange, hazy sky of wildfire smoke coming from the north. So I like to say when I give lectures, no one's immune to the impacts that we're facing from catastrophic wildfire. And that's where, had Indigenous peoples kept burning, kept our fire stories alive, kept land tending practices, the world might look different today. So I know it's hard to imagine not being on one of the fire-prone communities that I write with, but certainly our health is being impacted. Our gathering practices that we could normally go out and have a season to have a harvest and land tear. For us in the fire world, our opportunity to burn and burn safely, where it's not as big of a risk, our burn windows that we typically have because of a changing climate and environment, those windows are closing. We have smaller gaps to get out on the land and conduct fire responsibly and with the proper permissions. The problem is growing beyond wildfire-prone states. So a substantial part of our thesis pushes for bigger shifts from co-stewardship to authority. I appreciate the idea of co-management and co-stewardship, but our peoples need to lead. We need to be the ones making the decision, and they need to be community informed and centered on our cultural lifeways. So a substantial part of our thesis pushes for this, proposing that Indigenous peoples obtain not only consenting and collaborative roles, but leadership positions in governance, wildfire resilience, and mitigation research and projects. Overall, this paper establishes coalitions in shared research and land tenure opportunities and barriers, because the same policies and land access issues and remembering our fire stewardship and land stewardship practices, because those memories have survived several waves of colonization all across what we know as the United States. It's hard for our elders to remember. It's hard for our younger ones to obtain knowledge that's still being remembered or that's still being activated in time out on the land. So these are issues not only that our tribes here in what we call the United States are facing, there are issues that bridge across First Nations communities in Canada, Aboriginal communities in Australia, who have the same barriers, the same shared histories, distinctly different tribes and cultural lifeways, but the same obstacles that we face here in remembering that fire knowledge and connection to lands, our relatives are experiencing the same impacts in other parts of the world. So overall, what we try to write about are bringing together those coalitions that recognize both those barriers, but that we're building voice and momentum in the same solutions. We're pushing for policy reform here in the United States at the federal level that could be shared with our relatives in those different parts of the world to empower them to invoke other sovereignty, their sovereignties in their parts of the world, and mitigate other suppressive policies that have kept our peoples from our own homelands. So together we work towards healthy fire, healthy people, and healthy planet, led by governance and decision-making by Indigenous peoples. So to bring everything together, centering the research that we do with fire and the land, we connect it to policy, governance, and Indigenous rights. So here are some broader messages that are on the bullets and bigger messages that connect it in the sets below. As a fire person, a fire scientist, I start there. So in terms of ecology, myriad landscapes, including the ones we're on right here, historically were and presently are fire adapted, fire dependent, and having fire returned creates ecosystem heterogeneity, differences, which makes it more resilient. It makes it more resilient, especially in the face of catastrophe, wildfire, floods. In terms of science, as this is connected, Indigenous peoples, we need to lead our ecological research. It goes back to the point before about how TEK is upheld within academia and within research opportunities in collaboration with Indigenous peoples. Policy, fire remains in our future. We must reform outdated suppressive policy and balance with our wildfire recovery efforts. And overall, we need to have Indigenous governance that is recentered and advantageous to our peoples in connecting our histories, our land keeping practices, and our cultural lifeways for the next generation. In terms of culture, fire belongs in many Indigenous peoples' historic land stewardship responsibilities. An exercise in fire stewardship is an exercise in sovereignty. Land care is essential, and the message isn't just for us rejuvenating, renewing, recreating our land use histories or our land stewardship responsibilities. When we're benefited with that knowledge, it benefits all of our shared communities. It creates protection and a connection to our land for the future that we're seeing change. I also have another Trudell quote. Maybe we should develop loyalty to this planet, this earth, and our descendants. So when we do this work, again, especially in TEK, it's often overlooked, over-romanticized, and generally left in the periphery of climate solutions. So I use fire stewardship as a lens to reveal underlying but connected issues advocating our TEK, including policy, data protection, and human rights, grounded through my interpretation of science, stewardship, and sovereignty. So as we leave today, I wanted to recall one more John Trudell quote taken from his book, Lines from a Mind, the words of John Trudell. As human beings, it's time to take responsibility for the power of our intelligence and use that power of our intelligence to think coherently. This isn't about whether we can or can't. This is about whether we will or we won't. Hopefully this talk supported exploration of the scholarship I've written underlying the importance of science, sovereignty, and stewardship towards the collective benefit of us all. So to close, here is a link to some of the papers that I've discussed, and as part of my own pillars as a professor of ethics, of co-production, and transparency. All of them are freely accessible, and everything that I've ever written is available through open access, which means students don't have to pay $40 to download one of the articles that I've been a part of. So with that, in my language, we say Ashont, all good things. Thank you, and I look forward to questions and conversation.
To go old school and use the microphone like a talk show host.
Also, for the professor and me, I have some prompts. I have a couple. I have just to help guide along people. That was a lot. If you're interested in eco-cultural research, being a professor, working with tribes, mentoring students, happy to give some quick answers. And then on each of the ballroom tables, I have some pictures about fire research. Some of them are plants, some of them are people, some of them are, the cartoon is over there, the project that I was a part of. So I'm happy to answer questions of any of those things.
Ethan, you can talk loud.
Yeah, and I know that part. So first off, thank you for being here. It was an eye-opening experience so you get to know about ecological knowledge and problems that many indigenous nations are working towards. So I have some questions that I wrote, and the first one I'd like to ask is,
So one of the questions I have is, when it comes to being a non-Indigenous ally, how would one work with Indigenous organizations, peoples, in challenging and solving the problems non-Indigenous governments, corporations, and individuals have been doing in the usage, management, and overall destruction of land? For example, the Ogallala Aquifer and the Great Salt and the Salt Lake City and the damages incurred by intensive farming.
Wonderful question, thank you. I'll give some streamlined answers. So I appreciate people asking, how can I be an ally? How can I support? And I'm sure folks might have heard from others, showing up when there isn't something to gain. I think that's what a lot of our Indigenous communities appreciate. And understanding you're gonna mess up. Things are gonna happen. I think when people come into collaborations assuming everything's going to go well adds to some of the missteps or mistakes that are made. So my best advice is to understand that there will be some tension, there will be some things that go wrong, but having a plan after that and continuing to show up and be of service and to help out, help with chairs, help with cooking, help with cleaning up, gift your elders things. I think many of our communities appreciate all of those. The second thing that I wanted to add, because I work in disaster, wildfire, right? People are coming to Indigenous peoples for this knowledge at an exceedingly high rate to solve a problem that statistically Indigenous peoples didn't create. We're in the lowest margin of error when it comes to contributors to climate change and wildfire risk. We're the most impacted, but we contribute the least to these problems. So what I'll say with TEK in general, there's so many people coming to us that want quick solutions, but we need time on the land to reactivate, to re-find our way back to this traditional ecological knowledge and create more that'll sustain us in a changing environment. It's that expectation of fast solutions to solve problems that took a long time to create. So have patience, give us access to land, let us bring our children, let us bring our intergenerational lifeways with us, patience with TEK. Thank you.
Hey, do you mind going over in a little bit more detail how specifically these intentional burns can help build resilience against catastrophic fires?
Sure. So I would appreciate if somebody that has a picture of people burning on maybe one of the tables. Do I have pictures of them? Oh, yeah, the Artemisia. Thank you. So she's got a great picture there that has, if you look closely, there's an elder in the background of the picture. That's Dana Mandera. She's Maidu Wintun Hupa. She's our fire practitioner that guides the next generation in time out on the land. Because interestingly, the professor, I learned college students don't get a lot of time on the land, even in ecology and environmental science courses. So one of the things that we try to do, teaching a class on fire stewardship, I hope you saw the picture, is more gentle fire. So getting students out on the land and building that reconnection to place is the first step. Learning about Indigenous peoples' removal and histories that precedes colonization was so key on that time on the land. We also got time on the land with Indigenous histories. So it was a great culmination of things. So what I'll say with intentional burning, so I'm a fire steward. I appreciate people getting out on the land, farmers, ranchers, wildland firefighter professionals. I have no issues with that. But with Indigenous peoples that I work with, they want to make sure that we know that cultural burning, the definition that I went over, it's Indigenous-led. If you notice, that was the first thing in the definition. It's decided by and governed by, which is an exercise of sovereignty. The difference between maybe what agencies do, wildland firefighter services, it's very militant. It's very, I have my greens, I have my yellows, I have my pack, I have permits and I have permissions, which I'm in favor of too. We need help. We need people engaging in good fire, intentional fire. But what's different is as Indigenous peoples, our burns are slower, our burns are cooler, which invites other ecological responses and processes versus a lot of flame, head fire, a lot of propane, a lot of gas. So it's different because of somebody has, might you hold that one up, Trudell family? So this is basketry material, and on the right side, her right side, those are plant materials that haven't seen fire. The plant materials on the left are materials that have seen fire. You'll see the difference. Maybe not way back there. But the left side, they're stronger sticks. They're more uniform in color because they've been stewarded with lower temperature, lower severity fire. So I love that visual from that's Danny Manning. He's a Milo cultural fire practitioner and basket weaver. So there's differences in ecological response, but more importantly, it's Indigenous peoples that decide and have those cultural objectives as opposed to fuels management, which again, both of them are wonderful, but to truly be a sovereign burn, which is in our new paper, it's a new term that one of the practitioners, not me, came up with, it has to have that decision making by our peoples. I hope that helps. Yeah, thanks.
So somebody else had their hand up.
I did, but that answered a lot of it. I was curious what you meant by low intensity burns, because I've gotten the honor of being involved in some controlled burns, and I see in some pictures, like there was one that you had shared where you guys were kind of burning in the snow, and just thinking about like that's going to leave a good patchwork, because I've done them on days where it just sweeps across the landscape really intensely, and days where it doesn't. And I worry about habitat destruction.
Yep, a lot of people do.
And so I think your last statement really helped answer that already, but I did have one more if I
absolutely.
I've seen the smooth brome and crown vetch really knocked back by consistent fire. And without reseeding, I've seen a lot of, for lack of better, like lead plants and blue stem and these types of grasses come back without reseeding. And I'm wondering how much of your work centers on reseeding versus, rejuvenating the seed bank that's already in the soil. And if we are collecting seed to reseed, maybe some holistic or careful ways that we can make sure that we're not degrading an environment by over-collecting or things like this.
Sure, yeah, I appreciate that. And I will say, because they're cultural birds, they're defined and upheld by the tribes. I've worked with so many tribes and tried to be respectful as I can to the place-specific protocols that they have with their plant materials, with their plant relatives. So I will say, I'm speaking big picture here, in the West, it's so hard to get burns. It's so hard to get prescribed and controlled burns because everybody has this ingrained fear of fire, and they're still living with the consequences of fire suppression. Agencies were established with zero fire restriction, with restrictions that prohibited burning, intentional, indigenous, any kind of burning. If there's a 10 a.m. rule, if there's a wildfire going, it had to be out by 10 a.m. And they wouldn't allow fire to run its natural course to promote the growth of those diverse plant species. So I will say, in the West, it was a success. It was a success if we were able to burn that day, and if the burn stuck to the prescription, which is what you write out how much you're supposed to burn the land, the area of land. So different environment, but I wasn't able to be with a tribe that directly reseeded, or that reseeded directly after burn. But now, changing regions, so now I'm here in the Midwest, I'm in the Great Plains, and working with the Aya tribe specifically, they burn and then they reseed immediately. So it's interesting to see different protocols and different approaches, different soil systems, different plant and vegetation systems. So I'm collecting all of that and try to support as best as I can the tribes that I'm working with. But the reseeding effort, I'm sure you know, a lot of the seeds that we do, if you do restoration work, they don't have a great success rate. It's because our soils have experienced so much through farming and large-scale mineral mining. Our soils are depleted. And so we need something like fire to be able to add to those nutrients post-fire and stimulate or improve, work towards improving that native species regrowth. I hope that helped answer some of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Time for maybe a few more questions.
Workout manuals.
Most of them have a few days here.
I don't per se have a question, but as a Native community member, I want to say throughout your presentation, you've done an excellent job at letting people inform that you really need to make time to be a part of that community. You know, if they are going to be resistance, you know, we're still in the early form of working with non-Native tribes, and you didn't. I'm retired from the University of Kansas Medical Center, Dr. Toy and Dr. Bailey, and you did, and just, I cannot applaud you enough throughout. The most important thing is that no Native tribe is the same, and that's really hard for people to understand, especially non-Native people. And you, like you said, throughout your whole thing about you're presenting yourself to be a part of their community. And it takes I don't know about other communities because I'm only Native and only around Native, but you got to make time for them. Go to the walk-in run, volunteer. It's not always about monetary. Time is the best gift that you can give to the Native people. And I just want to applaud you on your whole presentation. You keep reinforcing that. And I was a part of the Center for American Indian Community Health with Dr. Choi. And our biggest resistance, even as we're Native people, is going to another community. You've got to make, you know, just a little time, you know, not so much monetary, but time to the community, showing them that you want to help extenuate community. So I just wanted to say, excellent presentation, just excellent.
I think that's very generous and very kind words. I'm blushing. Thank you so much for being so forthright and for really highlighting the things that I hope people take with them. And I wanted to add more to the question about working with tribes and being allies. Be a good guest. Be a good guest. Bring that with you when you come into our communities. Don't expect everything the first time you visit. Know you're going to make mistakes and be okay with that, and to keep coming, keep showing up. Yeah, help us clean, help us put chairs out. Bring gifts please bring gifts for our elders. They don't like to say that, but
well, they love incentives. They love incentives, just like a hand sanitizer or a light.
Yeah.
Any incentive.
Yeah. Well, as professors too, there's ways that we're on grants to be able to gift honorariums. So please work with your institution to be able to gift our elders compensation for their time, for their energy. You're asking them to share culture, which in some ways it awakes things. You know, there's things that we go through when we share our culture, when we share our histories. So please be mindful of that and the labor that goes into it.
Community engagement.
Community engagement.
Yep, great.
Michelle, thank you.
Could I hear about the eco-cultural research bullet point?
Sure. We were getting to that, right? So I will say, my broad statements, I'm in the fire space, I work on fire ecology, so that's where I'll start. It's informed with and parallel to Indigenous research methodologies, whatever you want to call it. I want to spend time with elders, and I want to make time for community, so that's how I activate Indigenous research methodologies. It really does mean spending time and engaging ethics and protocols with our communities. So the eco-cultural research part of it is I'm in the field of fire ecology, and so much of what we know in a 50-year, their time scale, not mine, 50 years of fire research, so much of it is pointed to what happens to our ecosystems after catastrophic wildfire events. High intensity, high frequency, not so much the intentional fire part of it. So much of the literature is catastrophe. What's changed in the past 30 years is ecological research is pointed towards prescribed or controlled fire. What ecological effects does seasonal burn have? Does fire return interval have? And then the last 10 years is where Indigenous peoples' fire use, historically, and even newer, the last 5 years, contemporarily. So I had my students do this research review or this literature review. I think 100 articles on cultural fire came out this past year. 23 of them were like matched what the keywords were really cultural fire research. A lot of that was paleohistory. 2 of them maybe are field trials in the ground, guided by Indigenous knowledge fire. And I will say anecdotally, because maybe it shouldn't be studied, the ecological effects that occur with lower temperature, lower severity fire, and re-welcoming our peoples back to their homelands, it awakens the ecological system. So on more than one burn, we placed fire, and species of significance that hadn't been seen in decades reawoken, and we're seeing for the first time in 20, 30 years. Does that need to be studied? Probably not. But it needs to be continued. It needs to stay within our tribes and with our communities. We don't know anybody of validation. That's the other thing about the TEK research, ecocultural research. It's not Western science at all validating Indigenous knowledges. In the field that I work, it's Western science that's catching up to what our Indigenous communities have always known. I hope that helps answer something. Yeah. Be sure to look at the Artemisia article. Yeah, you'll see some of the pictures of the plants. You'll see some of the pictures of the stewards. And I will say, the cover of the Native California, that's the journal, it has people on it. And in that publication's 50 years, it had only been plants. And that's a special issue that's on Indigenous peoples and climate change, and so they honored that by putting our people working with the plants, because it's a reciprocal relationship on the cover for the first time in 50 years. Please take the article. Yeah, if that's your interest. Yeah. Thank you. You've got one here.
Great.
Oh.
You just want to see me run.
In all your travels and your research among the various tribes, are there any legends of people who have special connections to fire and burning?
Oh, sure. Many, and I won't say all, but because it's not my place to say all of our tribes or to generalize in such a way. But more often than not, when I'm giving talks or sharing the work that I do, whether it's pictures like you all have, whether it's peer-reviewed literature on some of the tables, Indigenous people more often than not recognize it and say, hey, you know what? I think my people stewarded fire too, or my grandpa has stories of carrying fire, or he burned regularly to keep our cultural plants well kept. So more often than not, I run into it and it strikes a chord with the Indigenous peoples that I interact with. Although I can't name specificities, those are their stories to share, those are their histories to share. I will say that, man, it sure comes up. It's a cultural connector, I would say, in more places than just our own.
Thank you.
I will say, I'm not trying to plug my own work. I'm trying to uplift the community members that I write with, that I'm honored and have worked in partnership with to develop their relationship, to be able to do something like write a book chapter or write a peer review chapter, their trust that they have in some of the things that I do. The land keeping book, which I had a picture of. This one, first of its kind in history. So much history places us in the past and assumes that we stay there and doesn't tell the full story of our land keeping stewardship practices. I hear the story all the time that settlers came over and thought they found utopia, untouched lands of high diversity, high functioning systems. And they failed to notice, or didn't notice on purpose, the intentional land keeping practices that our peoples held since time immemorial. So much Western science about fire had not told that truth or not told those stories in a nuanced way, this book is the first book to do that. So if you're interested in any of the above, this is the anthology. You can find it on Oregon State University Press, or the QR code that I had at the very end. You can get 20% off if you have the coupon code. Yeah. So this is the first anthology of its kind. There's something upwards of 40 Indigenous fire practitioners, elders, that are generous enough to share their stories and to share the effects that they're having with their home communities in returning their fire stewardship practices. Again, uplifting others. I have something in there, but elders and practitioners are much more versed and have much more knowledge and wisdom to share.
We have time for one more question.
Thank you, Brady, and thank you, Dr. Adams, very much for your talk. I really appreciate it. I was interested in the low-intensity fires in wooded areas, like up with the Ojibwe, or, I was curious how, what kind of traditions or what have you observed, or maybe in California too, forested areas. And I was wondering how you keep that low intensity instead of the very aggressive.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I've worked with an elder who counts the number of burns he's been on, and oh my gosh, I think if I did that, I would lose count by now, or he counts them in a very special way. So I do a lot of broadcast burning, which is like sorting with grasslands, and they're high intensity, they're high. If you've ever burned grasslands in this area, those are broadcast burns. But out west, we do pile burning. So we go in and we cut and we coppice, and then we literally build piles, and then you apply fire directly to the pile. So that's how we keep lower temperature. We don't necessarily, the way we did it, we didn't drag fire in the forest floor. It's just, it's so moisture, such high moisture in those areas, the burn wouldn't be as hot as we need it to either stimulate the native species or to mitigate some of the invasive species growth. But I will say the folks, the Red Cliff Band of Ojibwe are the peoples that I was fortunate to write with. That's Melanie Montano, and that's Basile Panic, which Basile is one of our youngsters. He's much younger, and he helped steward this whole climate report. So please check out the work to see the work of our youth, our up-and-comings. So they're the Red Cliff members, and they actually have another paper about their paleo fire records, and I work with federal agencies, they work with state agencies to have access to their homelands to re-implement burning practices. It's fascinating, they're doing such amazing work. Please check out the STCAC to see more about the Great Lakes Ojibwe tribal members region as well. Of course, thank you. Michelle, thank you so much. Those are very generous questions. I appreciate everyone.
Well, Dr. Adams, we wanted to thank you for making the drive up here from Marsden. I know how that drive is. So thank you for such a great talk. Thank you so much.
So on behalf of the Native American Studies program and our partners that helped make this possible, I wanted to extend my deepest thank you for being here tonight, for certainly putting up with the technological delays that we had and so forth. But this was a fascinating talk. It was great. And I thank everybody for taking their time. Again, for the Trudell family for always supporting this lecture, giving us permission many years ago to do this. And for all of you who took time to come here, to spend time with us and so forth, it means a great deal. So from Kyle to Tim to Dr. Mitchell to Douglas and so forth, for all of you that again are here and support the program and support what we do, it means the world. And so thank you very much. And if we have time, I would like to have Douglas maybe sing a traveling song if we have time. This is to ensure everybody you made it here safely this evening, and the song is basically in a good way to make sure that you make it home in a good way too and safely. I want to again thank Douglas for always basically being present with us and helping us out with our programming. Once again, thank you all. Before you take your leave and have a safe journey home, I do want to actually kind of beg and plead for you to take all this food away from me. I certainly don't eat it, and I don't want it to just sit there. So feel free to take as much as you like. Thank you all again, and have a safe trip home. Thank you.